Hello, this is Dr. Kenny Williamson. Welcome back to another episode of Melchizedek Chronicles. We have an interesting episode, at least I think it's interesting today. We're going to talk a little bit about something called the Flux Liner, in case you haven't heard of that. And I've heard about it before, but never really thought about talking about it too much. The only reason why I decided to do it this time is I was watching another podcast. It was another one of Danny Jones' podcast, and if you don't want to hear a bunch of filth and cussing, I would not advise ever listening to one of his podcasts. But he had a so-called scientist, PhD something on there, and it was actually about Epstein and Antarctica. The reason I was interested in it, I saw it, is it said it was going to tell you what's beneath Antarctica. And of course, now these people believe in a globe, and so they believe that Antarctica is at the bottom of the globe and it's a little continent down here. That's clearly not what flat earthers believe. However, he went on this podcast to talk about how Epstein, which I didn't know this is what he claims, allegedly. Supposedly, Epstein and Maxwell, all that little group over there, that this whole pedophile island thing they were doing that, but it wasn't really what they wanted to do. That was just to kind of keep money coming in. They were actually on the search for Atlantis. And supposedly, allegedly, Epstein, was this genius, and he was all into paranormal and Atlantean stuff, and they had discovered, or what they had thought had discovered, was Atlantis under the ice in the Antarctic. And it was ridiculous, I think. But anyway, what did come up, though, you see, this guy was talking to the host about, the different things the government was doing, and this Flux Liner came up, and the moon landing came up. And so the host, Danny, he's like, what do you think about that moon landing deal? Because, he just had Bart Sabrell on there and the astronaut, and he just had them on the other day. And I made a podcast about it myself. And so he was kind of relaying what Bart Sabrell had said. And what's funny is this guy, he said, oh, yeah, he said the same thing. He said and he believes in the globe, and he believes in outer space. But he said, yeah, that Apollo deal was all fake. He said, it was all propaganda put out because of Cold War, trying to, pretend that we have superior science over Russia and all these others. And then the podcast host, Danny, he was mentioning about how these astronauts that came down from Apollo had changed, and they were different people after that. And then, of course, their lives fell apart, all the whole 9 yards. And this guy said, oh, yeah, that's because they were MK Ultra'd. He said, yeah, they were an MK Ultra project. So, they were programmed in a dark corner somewhere, in a dark room, in a basement somewhere, everything to say about a fake moon landing. And so after they got MK Ultra'd, it messes with your mind, obviously. So these people basically went insane after that, or had completely different personalities, and that's what happened. And even this guy said, oh, yeah, it was all fake. It's filmed in a basement or filmed on a studio set. He even said it himself. He said, yeah, probably filmed by Stanley Kubrick. He's the guy that came out with 2001: A Space Odyssey before the moon landing. So he was kind of like the go-to guy for science fiction. So, yeah. Filmed by Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick is my best bet. Yeah. So anyway, and the other thing which I found interesting, let me post a picture of it here. This, in case you don't understand, this is a Flux Liner. The Flux Liner is, if you can't see this, is a spaceship, is what it looks like. It looks like your regular old dome-looking spaceship that you see in the sci-fi movies since the 50s. Now, according to this guy, the Nazis actually discovered this type of propulsion system back before World War II. So they were working on this in the 40s, 30s, and 40s. Basically, according to him, and my understanding is, they actually came out with the technology initially, the Nazis did over there in Germany, and they called it the Bell. And the other word, I think they called it was Die Glocke, something like that. Die Glocke. Anyway, so it was otherwise known as the Bell, and the pictures of it that artists have, conceived up, looks like a giant bell, basically, with doors on it and stuff. Supposedly, this thing could levitate, and supposedly, allegedly, this thing, they had it in some big facility with chains on it to keep it just like from floating away. And at some point it disappeared. And either somebody stole it or, it just supposedly disappeared. Somebody said that it even possibly, flew off and got destroyed. Well, according to this guy, our deep state here that's running the show here in America, which consists of, in my opinion, fallen angels and devils and demons, he claims that the initial deep state were Nazis. And, they were really, really brilliant over there, and they had discovered all this stuff. Now, how they did all this, I don't know. And somebody mentioned this because I mentioned something about some bad guy here the other day, and I mentioned Hitler. And so they called me out in the comments and said, "Oh, you think Hitler's a bad guy? Well, you must be." What he say? You must have went to public schools and been indoctrinated, and you don't know anything. Basically, I did reply to his comment. I said, "Yes, I did go to public school, unfortunately. However, I don't necessarily believe the mainstream narrative of what happened over there. Okay, I don't know. There's a chance that everything is a lie. A big chance. So, make a long story short, these guys, whatever they were doing over there in Germany, Nazis, they come up with this technology, their scientists did, called the Bell. And they also had rocket scientists. That's where Werner von Braun came over and founded NASA, right? He was one of the NASA founders. He was a German scientist, an ex-Nazi. So, when you do a little research on those guys over there, they had a cult. They called it the Thule Society, or Thule, depending on where you hear about this, how you pronounce it. But anyway, supposedly, make a long story real short, these so-called scientists were over there basically worshiping the devil and tried to have mediums and everything else communicate with supposedly aliens. I believe if any of this even happened, which it probably did, they were communicating with demons, devils, or fallen angels. That's what they were communicating with. And this is the same thing that happened at NASA, right? Werner von Braun gets over here from Germany, and he's, inventor of the V2 rocket, where we didn't know anything about it over here, but they were already flying them around over there. So this guy's a genius. Where did he get his information? I don't know. Maybe he thought it all up. Maybe he was that smart. Maybe it was given to him by an entity, not an alien, an entity. And so anyway, so some of the other NASA guys, like, the guy from JPL, Jack Parsons, he was a NASA guy right in the beginning. And, it's documented that he was trying to learn how to build rockets and he was trying to get the information from demons, and that he would have these big parties at his house or wherever that involved, these big sexual things and worshiping the devil, trying to get information. So doing some kind of ritualistic, satanic ritualistic things to get this information given to you so you can understand what's going on. So these Nazis come over, okay, and they're the ones that has this information. Die Glock, the bell, it disappears. And you can see that on all kinds of stuff. According to this guy, that was like the very beginning. That was the precursor to the Flux Liner. So they had figured out how to tap in to the energy around us. Now, in the Flat Earth Society type realm thing here, you can read about a thing called the ether, which you can look at some old scientific stuff, and the ether was on the list, but they've removed it. And, I'm not a scientist, but somehow this stuff is working in our universe, if you want to call it that, in our world under the dome. It works, I think, on electricity. And so a lot of things are electrical. So that's why we have all these electrical charges, and our body runs as an electrical machine. If your heart goes out of phase or is beating incorrectly, they can shock it back. They can, because it's putting off electrical pulses, and they can change those pulses and give you all kinds of treatment on your heart electrically. So we're some kind of electric being. The sun and the moon and the stars are probably moving around based on electrical something. And so we've also got something they call the ether, which is electric. Well, supposedly they tapped into this. I'm sure that a fallen angel said, hey, you got free power out here. This is probably the same electricity power they were using back in the ancient days, whenever they built these gigantic monstrosities of buildings and all kinds of stuff, and nobody can figure out how they did it today. They were probably using some type of energy, free energy. They were harvesting from the atmosphere, and they could mold it or levitate things, do things of that. That's how they got, 50-ton boulders cut completely perfect in every detail, and they somehow managed to move it at like 1,000 miles and set it in place. Where today we don't even have a machine that can budge the thing. We have no clue how they moved it. It can't be done. And you've seen them when they try to do this stuff with a lot smaller rocks or boulders or whatever. The machine just scratches and gouges it all up and tears it up, and it falls down and a corner breaks off. Just demolishes the thing trying to move it. And these things are absolutely perfect in every detail. Perfect. And when they set two of them together, the seams are absolutely perfect. And they've been sitting there for 4,000 years, and they're still perfect. We can't even begin to replicate that kind of stuff now. Take a look at the junk we build now. And it's not all about the money. We don't have the technology to keep that stuff together. We don't even know how they did it. So I believe they had access. Well, number one, they had, obviously, the brains to do it. They were dealing, we're dealing with fallen angels here. We're dealing with devils, and they have that kind of information. They know what's going on. And so I believe that they said, hey, you worship me as a god, I'll give you this information. And that's what was going on way back, and it's still going on. That's why guys in NASA in the 50s are worshiping the devil and having, orgies and having all kinds of other weird stuff, probably bloodletting, blood sacrifices to these demons or fallen angels to try to get information. So they know how to do it. They know how to get the information. So apparently the Nazis figured that out with these occultic societies that they were all in, the Thules, the this, the that. And so they figured it out. So then we have World War II, whatever, and the Nazis start coming over here, which made up our CIA and other stuff. It was all Nazis initially, according to the sources. And so they brought over that information, and they knew how to build the bell. And so what they did is they said, well, you're an American now. Welcome to America. Now you're going to build it for us. And so then they built it with an American twist on it. And so instead of Die Glock, now it's called the Flux Liner. And if that's not American, I don't know what would be. I mean, think about that for a second. What other things do we have that say liner in them? Like if you were to say like a ship could be an ocean liner. You know, you've got an airliner. We've got, boats, like one of the boats' names is a bayliner. And it's like, I think Boeing, one of its jets is a Stratoliner. Everything's something liner. And that's kind of like American-made, liner. Get in your airliner and go. So is there any wonder that the thing's called the Flux Liner? Well, supposedly flux is because it uses some kind of special thing, the same thing as the bell did, to propel itself. And this is somehow pulling energy from the ether, or they also call it 0-point gravity, which obviously, you can call anything gravity, but I don't really believe gravity as how they describe it. It's really just buoyancy is what it is. So anyway, so supposedly this thing was at an air show, a private air show only for, like generals and stuff like that. This guy goes in there as a guest, more or less, and he sees it. He makes mental notes of it, and he shows it to his friend, his name Mark McCandlish. And this guy is an illustrator who illustrates jets, that kind of stuff for the government. He's like a technical illustrator. And so this guy described it to him, and this guy illustrated it. And that's where we have the pictures of it today. In fact, let's see here. Let me see if I can show you the picture. I have a picture right here. Let me go to this. There it is. Now, if you can see this, this is a picture that the Mark McCandlish guy hand drew, or however they do it. And so this is a cutaway of it. Really simple. This is not a spaceship from outer space. Okay, so forget that right now. It kind of looks something like weird, kind of looks like the bell from the Nazis, only an Americanized version. They said this thing, however, at the bottom, it's got these copper rings and stuff. It somehow sucked power from the ether. And it's got oxygen tanks in it. The thing's made out of steel. The door up here at the top, it's got a door that kind of looks like a submarine door that you twist a handle on and the pegs come out to lock it in place. It's got military-style jump seats across in the top of this thing that look like ejection seats, but they look like something that was used out of a jet or something. It has portholes all around it, but in those portholes are actually cameras. And the porthole itself is a protective cover to cover the camera. So you don't have to be looking out a window to fly it. You can simply look at screens that shows what's ever on the camera, right? So this thing was described as, I'm going to get rid of that right there. This thing was described as being seen, and there was like 3 different sizes, supposedly. There was like a little one, a big one, and a bigger one. And they were in this hangar, and this guy got to look at them. And so he later described them, and here's where we get the drawing. He said these things were very well used. They were painted like a military color, black or dark green, OD green. They had like the little things you twist like aircraft do and race cars have. It's like a thing you twist and it unsnaps a panel. Very common. I forgot what they call those, but whatever that is. He said it had those all over it, and some of the panels had been taken off, and you could see up inside of it. And supposedly, there was scratches all around everything where you can see where screwdrivers had been. There was footprints on it where people had walked up the side and walked around the rim to get in the door. Handprints, scuffs, scrapes. He said these things looked old. They weren't new. It looked like they had been very well tested and been people all over the things, footprints all over the things in the dust. And the only bizarre thing about the whole thing, he said it looked like off-the-shelf components. There was nothing weird on it, like, oh, that's from another world. No, just regular old metal, regular this, regular that. Everything written in English, you know. He said the only thing weird about the thing is it was hovering. It was just sitting there, and people could push it, and it could be pushed around. So the thing just hovering, wasn't being held up by strings, wasn't being held up by wires, had no wheels under it. It was hovering. Now, come to find out, this thing was built by Lockheed Martin. This thing was at an Air Force base, Norton Air Force Base. It was in a special hangar, which that time they called Hangar 4, supposedly. And it was literally built by Lockheed Martin. It was built by Lockheed based on design specifications and stuff they got from Nazi designers who built the Bell. Same design, same concept, only more Americanized. Built by Skunk Works or Lockheed Martin. Supposedly, the CEO at the time of Lockheed Martin was interviewed, and he mentioned these. He didn't mention the Flux Liner, but he mentioned technology that had been put into this that grabs power from the ether and can redistribute it, and it uses some type of magnetism to, I don't know how, I'm not a scientist, right? But that's how it hovers. And you can apply that to whatever and make it go up, make it go down, make it go wherever, fly this thing around. Now, obviously there's still people inside of it doing it, so, you know, you're still bound by physics right here on the ground. So, built by Lockheed Martin. Really the only thing fantastic about this thing is the power source. The machine itself was rudimentary simple just to get the job done, and they could have put it probably in any other form, but this is the form that it was in, probably because it came from the German designers, and the Bell looked very similar. Excuse me. So, having said all that, this guy that was on the podcast, he was describing these things and talking about the guy and talking about how the CEO of Lockheed wanted to, you know, start building something like this, only probably not in that form. And the military came in there and they said, listen, you've got the prototypes. We've been testing them. We know they work. They're great. We love them. However, this can never reach the public. It can never be shown to anybody. And, you know, we're flying them around testing them. That's why people have supposedly seen them. They think they're seeing UFOs from another planet. They're not. They're basically seeing top secret military equipment that's being tested. Nothing more. And they're like, this can never get out. And so then the people are, most people logically would say, well, they don't want it to get out because it's a spaceship. No, it's not a spaceship. If any of this is true, they're telling you it's not a spaceship. Okay, it's developed right here on Earth. Probably the science behind it is fallen angel technology because they know what's going on, so they can tell you how to do it. All you got to do is follow their instructions if you're smart enough to do it. They don't want you doing it because they don't want you knowing about it, because if you figure out this thing can hover without any engines running, without fuel being burned, and you can pull power right out of the ether and supply it to something, and this thing has been supposedly hovering since the 40s, and it's still sitting there hovering, there's nothing to go wrong with it. It just sits there. It's just sitting there hovering. People would wonder, why are we paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 electric bills to run things? Why are we buying gasoline and diesel and jet fuel and worrying about all this fake climate change where everything has to be battery operated now, right? So everything's got to run on a battery, but the lithium mines are these big death traps that poison everything and people getting killed. And of course, that's why they're only in third world countries. And then you've got to charge the thing up. So you've got to be plugged right back into the electrical grid and run up your electric bill to charge the thing. Well, why would anybody want to do that if you have some kind of technology here that literally sucks it right out of the air, like something Tesla? This thing supposedly had some kind of a Tesla coil inside of it. So Tesla, if you know anything about Tesla, and I don't mean the Tesla piece of junk car that they're trying to pass off as, super high quality. A friend of mine has a paint and body shop, and they've worked on a couple of Teslas, and he said the interior of those cars are like 90 models, old Chevrolet 90 model, like a Geo Metro. Cheap plastic junk. Like, the big screen they show, oh, look how fancy. He said just flopping in there. I mean, everything's cheap on them. And they cost $100,000, but they're so cheap. He said there's like a 90s model Geo. That's how cheap they are. This junk. So, I'm not talking about that kind of Tesla. I'm talking about Nikola Tesla. Supposedly, he figured out how to pull this energy and stuff out of the air. And this is all right around when people are trying to get electricity going, right? And, of course, he said, well, you can pull it out of the air. All you got to do is this, and it can be free for everyone. And they're like, free? Get out of here. No, and nothing's going to be free. We're going to make money. We're going to be billionaires off this stuff. They, meaning me and you, the minions, they can pay us for this technology. But we ain't giving nothing away. And so now they figured out how to meter it to you so it costs you a fortune, right? That's kind of what it is now. But Nikola Tesla, he supposedly could pull this stuff out of the ether or however, and with these coils and other stuff. And that's why, when he died, they came in, the FBI or whatever, and took all of his information and left with it. So nobody else can have that knowledge. And so now they, oh, that's not true, because they don't want you to have it. They want you to be dumb and pay your bills. That's what they want you to be. That's what public school is all about, to indoctrinate you to be a worker, to go pay your bills to them so they can be rich. So supposedly this thing had a Tesla coil of some type in it. I don't know. Again, I'm not a scientist. I don't know how a Tesla coil would work in a thing like this. But supposedly it had one, along with lots of other stuff. But it was made out of copper and just regular old stuff. I think they said some of the stuff had some stuff called Mylar on it, which is made by a U.S. company. It was like 3M Corporation or whoever it was made this special Mylar and these different things, and a lot of stuff had that on it. But it's just made right here. Nothing from outer space. I don't believe it's any type of space-age technology, obviously, because I don't believe in space and I don't believe in aliens. So all you have is water, and all you have are demons and fallen angels. That's what you have. So this is man-made right here in the United States of America by Lockheed Corporation. They're not allowed to give the technical stuff away because people like me and you would want it in our car, right? I mean, why would I want to pay thousands of dollars in diesel fuel when I could have something like that under the hood of my pickup truck and it just pull itself around? And it just runs. Just always on, and just go. Free. Obviously, they don't want that. So that's why we can't have it. But the moral of the story of this thing is this guy that was on the podcast, supposedly a PhD, he even said, hey, I think the moon landings are fake. It's propaganda, MK Ultra. And yes, people are seeing UFOs. They're not from outer space. They're from right here. It's made by our own government. They're experimenting with all kinds of stuff. And back in the 40s and 50s, this thing was built, the Flux Liner. And it's proven technology. And they had this thing in an air show 30, 40 years later, hidden. I say not a public air show, but something to the effect of that. And these things are still sitting there hovering all these years. Scratches all over them, just pushed up into a corner. It's like, well, we're not going to destroy it, so we're just going to leave it over there hovering. It's not costing anything to hover. And so they just lock it up in a hanger and forget it. You know? So, but American made. You know, right here in the US of A. Not from outer space. So this goes a lot right along with something that I've said for years is that, yeah, people are seeing UFOs. And they're saying, oh, I saw a UFO. Oh, you're crazy. No, people are actually seeing these things, I'm sure. But they're not from outer space. They're from right here. So either they're Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, who knows who all else is making them, and for who and for why. And they probably come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes. Like the one said, they've come out with one that they call it the Tic Tac. So you know what a Tic Tac looks like. So I'm sure it's the same stuff in a different form is all it is. Government's using it, testing it, whatever. Yeah. So in my opinion, if any of this stuff is true, and this stuff really happened, and this is really a drawing of what the guy saw, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Because you will see this same stuff, you know, and all these other different things. Oh, that's from an alien from outer space. That came from another planet. Yeah. No, it didn't. No, it didn't. It's from right here. We built it. The Nazis figured out the technology. We perfected it or worked on it too. They got it from fallen angels. They didn't, you know, the technology has been around. It's ancient technology. They were smarter in the past than we are now. There's no such thing as evolution. We are not evolving into bigger and better. We're de-evolving into worse and worse and worse. So, you know, these guys, to get this information, they really think there's something, you know, worshiping the devil, and the devil or these fallen angels gives them little tidbits of information they can piece together over years. And about that time, they die and burn in hell, and the devil starts him on a new one. So he's getting worshiped the whole time. The victims are ending up in hell, and then in the end product is something like this spaceship that doesn't fly into space, but it does fly around here, I guess. And it's a secret. It's top secret, you know. Somebody might learn how it works and apply that to the automobile industry. And we wouldn't want that, because then all the oil companies would go out of business. You know, we might apply it to something else, like an electric vehicle. We wouldn't want that. All the power companies would go out of business. You know, so it has to be hidden at all costs, but here it is. So anyway, I just thought I would mention that thing, because I've seen this same spaceship design many, many times, and it's always, oh, outer space, the aliens, you know. And the subject in this podcast came up, the Roswell incident, and I'm sure you heard of that. And it's supposedly one of these craft crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. And, you know, they denied it and said it's a weather balloon and everything else. Everybody's like, oh, you know, it's a big alien conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. And so half the people don't believe it because don't believe in aliens, and then the government tried to cover it up. According to this guy, it really happened. But it wasn't aliens from Mars. It was one of these ships here that was being developed by Lockheed at the time. And according to him, they had lots of their places that they develop stuff over there and in Mexico. They have branches all over that they bury stuff in that you can never get to. And basically we're test flying it. And it crashed. And they're like, uh-oh, one of our test ships crashed. We got to go out there and get it. And it was hovering, and, it was this, it was that. I'm sure it had supposedly had weird hieroglyphics written on it. Nobody knew what it was. I'm sure it probably didn't. If this really happened, and if it was one of those, it was built right here it was either built in Mexico or built right here in the USA. And it might have had schematics or something weird on it they didn't understand. And it might have had some hieroglyphics on it. If it was something demonic, devilish, that these, these fallen angels said, well, put this on here, and you probably couldn't even read it. But, supposedly there was bodies found, and they were these little bitty bodies. Well, this guy here said that back then, at that same time, they were experimenting all kinds of stuff on children. And they actually were doing surgeries on them and all kinds of stuff. And he named off a book, and I cannot remember it for the life of me, that this person had done in-depth study on that, and that if these bodies really fell out of this thing when it crashed, they were actually children. They weren't anything alien. They were nothing weird other than children. So that's why they looked little. Anyway, so I don't know what kind of tests they were doing on children, sticking them in the thing, probably. Who knows? I mean, they're doing stuff and have been doing stuff with children for years. I mean, children are always the ones that are missing. They do the experiments on, probably because they're easy to control because they're children, right? I mean, I don't know what else it would be. So anytime children come up missing or disappear, 300,000 of them from the border, Fauci's killed hundreds of them, experimenting with experimental drugs and then throwing them in a mass grave. I mean, it's always the children. I guess it's because they wouldn't want to do it like a guy like me, because I'd fight back. I would pull out a gun and we'd try to take as many out as we could before I would let them hook me up to a machine and pump me full of a bunch of drugs and throw me in a hole. That's just a thought. But you get some children, you can put them in cages, you can do anything you want. So, I don't know about that. I wouldn't put anything past this government. Okay, because I believe this government here is very well Satanized at this point. And so they're doing stuff that me and you can barely even comprehend. We can barely wrap our mind around all the stuff they're into. So anyway, I thought I would get on here and talk a little bit about that, just because I've had an interest in space and stuff my whole life. I'm a science fiction guy. However, I do know that it is science fiction. It's not real. It's cool to think about, in outer space, but it's not real. Okay, it's a Hollywood deal, and we may actually have some things like this floating around, flying around. Again, though, not from Pleiades, not from, wherever, Orion, not from Mars, from right here, being developed and built by the same people that are building all kinds of other airplanes and jets. They've got facilities and very deep pockets and black budgets that we're never going to understand or never going to see. We're not allowed to. So they're building all kinds of stuff. So if this is true, which, I can't, some people say it is, some people say it's not. I don't know. But I've got a whole bunch of notes here on it. It talks all about, all about it. But anyway, one of the reasons I thought it was funny, I say funny, cool to me, is that, it sounds like an American-made machine to me. The Flux Liner. You know, you're not going to get that from a spaceship, you know, from some other planet, from some other alien race. You know, they're not going to come out and call it the liner. All these other things are called the liners. So I just thought it was funny. Flux Liner, Airliner, Ocean Liner, Flux Liner. Anyway, I guess I'll get off here. That's really all I want to talk about. I've got some other stuff I'm coming up with pretty soon. Let's see here. Let me see what else I've got going on here. Yeah. Flat Earth Bible on Amazon. Melchizedek Chronicles by Dr. Kenny Williamson on Spotify and all other podcast platforms if you're interested. Melchizedek Chronicles by Kenny Williamson on YouTube. Go check that out. Also got Kenny Williamson Official on Rumble. And there again is a picture of the Flux Liner. I think it's a cool name. But probably fake as can be. I don't know. And if it is real, American made. German made. Between Germany and America, that's who made it. You know, made with regular metal. Anyway, thanks for listening. Let's see. Go check out the website. It's flatbro.com, truthseekersministry.org. Please like it, share it, and basically the moral of the story on this thing here is, if you see one of these spaceships, let's say you saw one of these machines, these UFO, let's not call it a spaceship, a UFO, it's probably our government doing it, and or some other government. It's not from outer space. You don't have to worry about being invaded by aliens. This is a technology probably came from the past, from demons, fallen angels, and we're just using it. So don't be scared of it, because these are just regular people. They're not aliens. Aliens don't exist. Demons exist. Okay, spiritual warfare exists. God exists and the devil exists. That's why you need to get saved before it's too late. Okay, so get saved before it's too late. Thanks for listening. And until we meet again, God bless you.